Saville, hello. We're in your exhibition here at the Newport Street Gallery. Looking at your early works from around 10 years ago, you were doing figurative, very detailed, beautiful ballpoint pen drawings, often of somebody who wasn't alive, like Bog Peter and such.
Yes.
And images drawn in bleach on blackout canvas. Can you tell us, does drawing and suggested narrative continue to play a part in your process?
Yes, although I use the internet more heavily these days within the process. So the algorithm of the internet will enable me to go on sort of journeys to find maybe connected stories within the work, whereas I would normally, 10 years ago, stay very heavily within maybe books and print materials and museum-based work. So I've moved very much to the online presence with my work in that way.
To a backlit screen, really?
Well, yeah, just a sort of screen existence as we all live in these days, I suppose.
And do you use it for research with imagery or stories or?
Well, both really, but imagery specifically because we have an infinite access to every image that was ever made nowadays. So we have this incredible way of narrating our own story through images. Like we would reach for a word, we can now reach for an image, anything we can think of. So in a sense that it's a kind of surrealist journey to describe making abstraction.
That's related to a second question that I have. What influenced you to be directed away from figuration towards these fields of colour?
Well, it's been a slow journey, probably starting in about 2011, and because I was always, from a child, able to kind of faithfully copy images, it felt a bit of a shackle, and I wanted to break away from working with images. And then over the course of the next few years, I started experimenting using abstraction, but then putting some images in and taking some out, and then eventually I ended up taking all images out of the painting and having nothing. And then I kind of felt by saying nothing, I was saying what I wanted to say much more holistically with the painting.
Can you tell us how you began to make the paintings that are exhibited in this exhibition, these fields of colour?
Well, they start, so I work quite traditionally, so I would work on practically very terpsy early layers, so they would have a lot of turpentine in the paint, and then as I built up I would have more paint and more medium added to them. But I spend a long time colour mixing on the palette I have made, which was a glass palette which is laminated white underneath, so I can see the pure colour underneath, and then I will start working just with how I'm feeling of that day with the colour, the palette I'm working with, and then as the paintings all start to grow together, it's kind of like writing a symphony or an album, so they all work together as a group. So they're not so much individual works as they are working with dialogue with each other.
So you're working on a number at the same time,
yeah,
in order for layers to dry. And that I was saying to a number of people who work here that they don't reproduce very well. They are absolutely exquisite when you see them face to face. In a surprising, they engulf, it sort of embrace you in a glow of paint.
Well, I think paint is an amazing substance to work with, and it does only what oil paint can do. It's the love affair, you know.
You talk about a lot of terps. How do you manage not to inhale too much?
I wear a mask for the early layers. As you get through the course of the painting, there's a lot of less terps, so it doesn't smell so bad, but the early layers are quite brutal. But as you mentioned before, I used to work with bleach, and that was really, really tough to work with. So I'm kind of used to working with quite aggressive material in my work, so I'm familiar with that. These figurative works were made at the same time. So the figurative works are made to describe the journey of the abstraction. So when I'm making the abstract work, I'll write on the wall words that come into my mind, and then I will Google search the words, and then that's what will end up being painted. So they are about the sort of cave you go into when you're making abstract painting.
The cave you go into?
Yeah, sort of psychological state, perhaps, when you're painting that you go into.